welcome, welcome. So today we're having a pretty fantastic conversation. I really, hopefully, enjoy a conversation that you can enjoy, a conversation that's going to add value to your day. We're going to be focusing on mental health, specifically mental health, um, from the perspective of Black and Brown men, because it's just not a common conversation nowadays, and it's really important for us to have those conversations. It's really important for us to really dive deep into what it takes for us to do the healing that we need to do, especially males and in minority groups. Like it's not a common conversation. So we wanted to jump on here and kind of just have an open and honest conversation about the things that we can really communicating and talking and being open about this subject. So I'm going to have my friend RJ Burke Cordova, who is a licensed therapist, jump on here, and we're going to be talking from the perspective of two males of color who are in the psychology field and our own experience about the trends that we see, and and basically the struggles that we experience ourselves, and even hopefully add some value to you in regards to what we can do in our communities to get better, and do the healing that needs to occur for us to really step into our light, live a fulfilling life, live a rich life, and you know break all the years of generational trauma and suffering that we've been experiencing. As you can see, this is my friend RJ. He is the kitchen. I'm just kidding. Like, he's just getting set up right now. And yeah, I'm really excited to have you, my guy. Like I was mentioning, RJ, he's a nationally certified counselor. He is a licensed counselor as well. He has his own practice. He works with people of different backgrounds and everything like that. But most importantly, he is just as passionate about sharing the message of mental health with our Black and Brown community. So I wanted to make sure that I take the time, and I'm good for you to taking the time to jump on here and have this conversation. Hopefully, whoever sees this can see that you can have these conversations. And yes, they can be hard at first, but they're necessary, and we need to have them. So to jump on, dive right in. Thank you, RJ. I appreciate you being here and taking the time to pour into our community, because we need it.
Yes, sir. Of course, man. Thank you for having me. This is my first one, so I'm happy to be here and join you in a very important and I think very necessary discussion. So
I agree 100%. Thank you. Thank you. Honestly. As we jump in, just because if you're following me, you probably know this amount about me. But can you tell us a little bit more about your personal background, and even like by personal, you can go as deep as you need to if you want to, of course. You don't have to go into so much detail, but whatever you feel comfortable with. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your professional background as well, because I feel like that's important as well.
yeah, no doubt, man. Yeah, I'm pretty much an open book, so I never have any shame in trying to be open about what I've gone through. So
Okay,
again, thank you for letting me have me. My name is RJ Bird Cordova. I'm a licensed mental health counselor based out of Orlando, Florida, and I've been practicing for about 8 years. I've recently, in the last couple of years, focused in private practice. I talk a lot about paying more attention to the Black and Brown communities. Those are the communities that I have experienced and I grew up with. So I know we're some of the least likely to seek out services. And so I'm trying to pay much more attention to that community, but also men, because a lot of men, I'm sure, Carlos, you might agree, a lot of us are the least likely to go seek out services. And so I'm trying to hopefully be a bridge of being more accessible to have these discussions, which is why I was very happy to be here and join you in this conversation. Personally, I mean, I've had a pretty interesting experience to get into therapy. I mean, I've gone through a lot of grief and loss in my life. I lost my mom when I was really young to cancer. And that was really like the first step that really got me exposed to a therapist. But I had no context for it. Like, I didn't really understand what it meant and what they do. I just understood that there was somebody that cared and that was trying to be a present figure and help me sort of begin to navigate my emotions and my feelings. So that was very helpful. But it wasn't until later years when I intentionally started going to therapy, because I realized that I had issues with love. I had issues with abuse. I had issues with emotional neglect and abandonment. And I didn't have any language or context for any of this stuff. And so, really taking the time to learn how that stuff works. And then ultimately, over time, as I got more exposed to it, wanting to be a part of that journey, a part of that process for other people, is eventually what got me to be where I'm at now and trying to be of service to those who may be going through those difficult experiences in their life. So that's kind of a brief rundown of how I got here.
That's amazing. And if you're listening, you can hear. I want you to pay attention to something very important in what he said, and not what the words he said, but how vulnerable he was. And I think that's very important in our communities for us to embrace our journey, embrace what we've been through, and really like embrace who we are, because it's beautiful. Every part of us is beautiful, and it's really important for us to do that with more people. And maybe like you don't have to like go live with like your friends and stuff like that and like share with the world like we're doing, but it's important to find someone who you feel comfortable with that allows you to be open and is there to support you without judgment. So I appreciate you, RJ, for being vulnerable, because I know that that's not easy, and I know that like I personally have to deal with a lot of like limiting beliefs, thinking that what are people going to say and all that stuff. So the fact that you're a male of color and you're willing to go on camera and make yourself uncomfortable, do your first live, and share your story is powerful. It's powerful. And I thank you for that. I really do. That's amazing.
No,
that's amazing.
Thank you, man. I appreciate being able to share a bit more about the story. And I know, like we've talked about before, for those that don't know, Carlos came onto my podcast and we had a really beautiful discussion. So maybe you'll be able to check that out at some point. But I know that it starts with us. You know, for those of us that do this type of work, we're probably the most likely to be able to engage in it because we at least know the language and we expect other people to be vulnerable with us. So naturally, I feel the need to want to be vulnerable with them and want to share a bit about my story. So you understand, it goes both ways. Like we, as therapists, we go through a lot of experiences as well. We've had to learn how to navigate a lot of challenges and traumas in our life. So a lot of us want to be able to give back to others. So that's exactly why I'm here, and I'm willing to share as much as I can.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's really powerful. So I did wanted to ask you like about some maybe trends that you noticed in your time being a therapist, specifically like you mentioned when it comes to like men of color, and what are some things that you've noticed that aren't necessarily helpful in our growth as a community and in our journey towards healing. So I was wondering if you've noticed any specific trends or any kind of behaviors or habits that you think are not helpful for us to like continue to move forward and grow.
Sure. I mean, now this goes deep because there's a lot, right? There's a lot that we do. I'm going to try very, very hard to not go off on a tangent or in the soapbox because this is something I'm very, very passionate about. But when we talk about men, right? Number one, I think a lot about as it starts when we're young, when we're very, very young, in a lot of the environments that we grow up in. And interestingly enough, I've been fortunate enough to know a lot of people from a lot of different parts of the world. And it's been my experience talking and asking a lot of them what it's like growing up in their particular environments with their family dynamics and what have you. And an interesting fact I've noticed from many of them is that they don't seem to come from backgrounds where their fathers were very emotionally available to them. In many of our households, it's very traditional. Fathers provide, mothers are the ones who give that emotional availability and access, right? Now, why am I even making that point? Why do I even think that that's important? Because it very much limits our ability as men to be more than just that provider role. It doesn't allow us to grow beyond that, number one. And then number two, when it comes to like relationship building, right? So whether it's you want to have a romantic partner, if you have a child, like I have a son, if you're trying to build relationships with people, you have to be willing to have a certain level of vulnerability with them in order to create strong bonds, right? Well, what happens if I don't get that opportunity when I'm young? And every time I do try to initiate, I get shut down. Over time, I'm slowly learning that it's not okay. I'm slowly learning it's not appropriate. So then I have fundamental difficulties, every time I'm trying to build a relationship with somebody. I don't know how to communicate well. I don't know how to be vulnerable well. So you can imagine that's why we hear a lot of stories about people say like, oh, we want men to be more open. But then at the same time, we're not always given the space and the opportunity to do that. And I find that not that everybody's doing this intentionally, but sometimes it can feel disingenuous because I want to be able to go there, but you got to help me to go there. You have to help me be there, right? Be invited, right? Reason why you and I are talking is because you invited me here. And we had a very honest discussion. And I'm hoping that this is creating that space for others to recognize that this is important and this is necessary. But for many of us, we don't get this space to do that. So it starts when we're young. The earlier we intervene and we make this feel normal, we make this feel appropriate and comfortable, the better off we're going to be. Because when you're older, it's harder. Like, take it from me as a therapist. I've had to go through so much therapy to finally be able to be more in touch with myself. Because I've been programmed for so long because of the way I grew up with my father to keep that stuff to myself. And it's just, it can lead to so much unnecessary hardship. And as a therapist, I'm always trying to prevent that, man. So it's just, it's hard for me. It's a very interesting dynamic that we have in today's society. And I want to help change it.
Dude, everything, like what you're saying is so powerful. And I think that's why this conversation is it's so important, because we're able to allow people to understand that, like, hey, we need to create that space. Like it's necessary. And it's a lot harder for us to really move into that healing and to, letting go of all that conditioning that's been put onto us for decades and decades and decades. But knowing that you're not alone and that and by talking about it to other people and talking to other people who support you, then that's when we can actually let go of all of those, like, basically generational traumas are holding us back. I love the verbiage that you used. I think that was very concise, and I believe we added a lot of clarity around not the issues, but the situation that's currently happening in our communities. Because it's something that's really common, and in most households, my personal experience, like, if I were to try to talk to my dad about like, whenever I ask my dad, how you doing, I will always get the same response: I'm good. It was the same thing always.
And it's
I
like
know
a straight line.
like life is like going.
Yeah.
Just
life doesn't go up or down. It's just like everything's always good.
Exactly. And I'm glad that you brought up, like, parenting, because I know you're a parent yourself, right? You have your own son.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you, like, when you were younger, what's something that you wish you knew now, after, like, going through your own therapy, being a therapist yourself, going through life, having your own kid? What is something that you wish you knew that you would tell your younger self? Or I imagine you're even telling your kid now, because
Oh yeah,
he's a younger mellow color himself.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. I think the first thing, to go back to the point that we were mentioning earlier, is that it's okay to feel how you feel. For a really long time, man, I got invalidated so much as a child that I always thought that it was best to just protect it, just push it down as much as possible. And I tried to even mask it even further by being a really good student, so that like to never give, like, a teacher or any other type of professional any reason to look deeper. And I recognize that helped kind of create and maintain a sense of discomfort in general about being open, because I wasn't allowing myself to be open with anybody else, or for somebody to ask me if I was okay. Because, again, I had been conditioned for so long to just keep it all in. So the first thing I would say, again, just like to any young person, right, is it's okay to feel how you feel. It's okay to have those days where things aren't going well. And I think those help balance, to a certain degree, the higher moments, right? Like we were joking earlier, right? You asked your dad, everything is ecstatic, right? No, but life's not. Sometimes your days you feel great, you're on a high. Some days you feel like crap, like it's not a good day. And that's the ebb and flow of life. But we have to be comfortable to actually express that. So part of it is, like, being okay with feeling it, and then, if I could, help us learn the language. You're like, how do I learn to express it? Because a lot of times I found, especially when working with like young clients or men in general, we talk around stuff. Like, it's not that we don't want to get to it, we just don't know how to. So we talk all the way around the issue until we can learn to pinpoint it. And if there was a way to kind of shortchange that process, it would be the younger you start, right? Learning your emotional intelligence, learning a lot of the language and the verbiage that we use, the more comfortable you would be. And then we could get to, okay, so this is what you're experiencing. Let's perhaps try these ideas to help you better manage and cope with that. And then we can build from there. That's what I would tell myself is I would hope that every parent, mother, father, grandmother, grandmother, grandfather, uncle, aunt, whoever's raising kids, right? Allow them to feel, try to create the space for them to be able to be vulnerable with you. That to me is so critical.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And something that really stood out as I was listening to you speak was how you mentioned that, you know, like we were saying, like life is, you know, has its ups and downs, and it's, those downs are necessary, because those now something that I learned in my own journey is that if you don't have those downs, and when you are up, you don't appreciate it as much. You don't understand how valuable it is. You kind of just like you're feeling good for 3 months, and you're just like, okay, whatever. But if you're coming from being really sad for 3 months, those 3 months really mean a lot to you. So I think that's I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's really important. Like we tend to, especially men in our community, they kind of just like shove down those bad parts, but and don't really allow themselves to feel that. But as you, and like most people know, like if you don't feel it now, you'll feel it later, and it's gonna be multiplied.
Yeah.
So like it's necessary. Like
So
you can't. The more that you push it, that you push it off, or like push it down, if you want to say it, the harder it is going to be later to heal and go through it and heal through it.
Yeah.
Like it's really necessary stuff. And I'm glad that you bring that up, because like in our conversation when we did our podcast, I've probably said this a million times, but we got to feel our feelings. We have to feel our feelings. Like we have to feel all of them. Not like the ones that we think are helpful or the ones that we think are positive or whatever. We have to feel all of them so that we can experience a whole range of human emotions.
Absolutely.
There's this actual like and if you're watching this, definitely go and try this out. But and do it with your kids. When I worked with kids on the autism spectrum, there's this exercise that we did, and it was around like we would give them a piece of paper, and I would have like I would have control of all the crayons and colors. And I would tell them, choose your favorite color. Cool. And let's say the favorite color is blue. They will go, and I'm like, all right, draw the most beautiful picture you can. Give them like 5 minutes. You know, even if you're the best artist, you can't really do that much in that time. But like they will draw like, you know, the sky or something really pretty. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Now choose 4 more colors. Cool. Do the same thing. Draw a beautiful picture. And then I would grab both pictures and I would show them which picture is better, which picture do you like more. And most of the time they would point to the picture with all the colors. And when that would happen, I would explain to them like that's how life is and that's how your emotions work. Like, yes, you could be happy or joyful, whatever the emotion you want to feel all the time, but that low-key makes life boring. When you have all of the colors, it literally adds color to life and it adds beauty to life. So we need all of that. We need all of that. And it's important, like you said, to start them young and to help them understanding whatever verbiage we need to use and whatever little activities that you need to do with them to show them like, hey, like all of your emotions are beautiful. All of them are necessary and all of them bring fullness to your life. So I 100%. I just have to share because you said that and immediately just went back to that exercise that I've done a million times with my kiddos. So I just felt like you know I had to share. But yeah, like conversations like this where we're able to really open up and share with our community how important it is for us to talk to each other. What is something that you would recommend to a young adult or a young male of color specifically who might be watching this that you think would be helpful for them to start feeling your feelings too? Because this is all vocabulary that if you don't know what we're talking about, you might hear it and not know how to put it into action. Like what does that look like in your opinion? What is something that you would tell that person so that they can start working towards that, and even like, get that process going.
No, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I would say, because it depends on how willing somebody is, right? I'm always big on talking about willingness because we have this space where more people are getting comfortable with seeking out therapy slowly. But that doesn't mean everybody's like, jumping over the hills ready to start. So I talk about willingness because if you're not willing to begin to like really do the work, then I don't want you to like force yourself to do it, right? So what are some other things that you can do? The first thing that I'm always, always very passionate about is start to journal. At least start journaling how you feel. Like start capturing what is going on in your mind and in your heart on a regular basis. Some level of consistency, 2 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever. Because I think it's important because I talk a lot about externalizing your feelings. So when you are sitting in like, just to give an example, when you're in a session with somebody, right? The purpose to me is you're trying to help us understand how and why you see things the way that you do, understanding your perspective, perhaps understanding your bias, right? The more that you come prepared with information, the more I can start to learn and understand, and we can start deconstructing some of these thoughts and things that you believe are true. So the more sort of information that you can provide, more of that lived experience, more of those memories that you can bring to the table, the more we can really go into detail. The great other part about that is when you don't have somebody there. This is the other reason why you journal. Let's say I don't have any loved ones that are nearby or that I feel comfortable confiding in. I'm not ready to start with the therapist yet, right? The great thing about that is you can get it out of your mind and out of your heart and start to more objectively look at it. What do I mean when I say I feel this when I'm talking to this person? That I feel this way when this person comes around? It gives us an opportunity to try to introspectively reflect. Think within ourselves. What does this mean? Why do I see it this way? Why do I feel this way? And then you take all that, you bring all of that, and then when you are ready to go into a session, man, it makes it so much easier to learn about somebody. Because you got to remember, we don't know you, right? We're trying to learn about you and learn why you see things the way that you do so that we can try to be helpful. And then, of course, there's other like self-improvement things you could do. There's books you could read or workbooks that you could work through. But I'm very big on journaling first because that has like the lowest barrier to entry. You could literally write it on a piece of paper. You could journal on your phone. You could voice to text. You could record yourself like we're talking right now. You could do it however you want to. But the point is, make the effort. Capture those experiences so that way you can go back later and actually start to look at them in more detail. I think that to me is like the most basic thing that we could all do, and it has so much value, but we don't always put the effort in to take advantage of it.
I agree. Wow. I agree 100%. Like that journaling, it's financially very doable. So if you can't buy a journal, you can literally, like you said, just record your voice. It's just an amazing way. But also, like you said, like help your therapist help you. So it's a really good way to just overall. I'm just like, please
help us, yes, please.
Yeah, seriously. But I wanted to add to that, and let me know if you agree with this as well. That like once you do begin that journey of journaling, it's important to go into it with the intention of non-judgment. Like, don't go in there with the idea that like, oh, like, what is this person gonna think? Like, go into it, write it, and whenever you are doing these journal entries, like, you're not gonna show that to anybody. That's simply for yourself. And going in there with absolutely no expectation. Just go in there and just be your true self without judgment. And I also wanted to just say that, like, as you start a new habit, like journaling, even if you're doing 2 days a week, and you fall off, because it does happen sometimes, especially after you've never done it for decades and decades and decades.
Yes.
Have compassion for yourself, have grace for yourself, and allow that to like be an opportunity for you to go back and keep going. Not to just give up and just say like, oh, I failed once again. Like, what's the point? But like, would you agree that that's something that is important as you like start your journaling?
Oh yeah.
Journey.
No, absolutely. And I like that you added in non-judgment. I know it's hard, and to be fair, it's very hard to not judge ourselves. and judge other people. Like, we all do it. And I'm not necessarily, I always like to make this distinction because I'm not necessarily against judgment. Judgment does serve a purpose. Sometimes, you know, it could be a life or death situation. You need to make a snap judgment. But with that being said, there's a lot of times where we take it too far. You know, we are doing things that largely don't benefit us in the long term. So I'm going to use the example that you gave because I think it was well said. So if I'm writing as if I'm writing personally to myself without the intention of anybody else going to look at it, right? Why would I frame it that way? Because the purpose is to be as open and as honest about what's really going on. The worst thing that we can do to ourselves is deceive ourselves. Is lie to us and tell us that things are not as bad as they are. I don't actually feel this way. Because you can't actually do anything if you don't acknowledge it, right? But writing it down, that's a good starting point. And I think giving ourselves that openness in that space to be a bit more gracious, a bit more patient, right? With ourselves. Like you said, you're trying to start a new habit, you're trying to change a behavior, it's going to take time. You know, if you think about something you've been dealing with for decades, don't think it's going to change in like a month. You know, like it's going to take you significant time and significant effort to make it where it is very foundational in your life. But give yourself the patience, though, to understand that I don't have to have this down right now, but I am actively trying on improving my life.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I feel like we hear this, and especially in the media all the time, when people talk about mental health, and it's like, do the work. Like it's and I feel like in this code we're able to kind of break down what the work looks like, and what you just said like puts it beautifully. Like we do have to be intentional. We do have to be kind of dedicated time and allow it whatever time it requires for us to get through it. Like if you can take anything from this, especially as a male of color, I want you to remember that, you know, if you want healthy relationships, if you want to expand within yourself, if you want to be more creative, if there's a million other benefits that you can get from this, do the work. Do the shadow work, I like to call it. Go inside, and most importantly, talk to somebody. Talk to somebody if you can. If you have the opportunity, talk to somebody, and if you can't, start with journaling. Because even then, like, you're talking to yourself, so that's good. It's a good start, and it's an objective way to make that progress. Right. So do the work. Like we do 8 hours of work for somebody else all the time. Dedicate half an hour to yourself at least a day. And do the work for you because you deserve it. And know that by you doing the work within yourself, you're helping your community, you're helping your family, you're helping people around you, and you can be more productive. You can do more because you dedicated that time to yourself. I know that many times some people might even call you selfish because you're like, what? You're taking half an hour to write on your little journal or whatever. You're not even going to show me. That's not. We're doing it for them. We're doing it for the people that you care about, so that we don't end up like a lot of males in our community who snap, who end up aggressing towards other people. We can be better, and it starts with us, and it starts with our decision. So if you make any decision today, decide to do the work. So thank you so much, RJ. I think like
can I add one more thing in there? Because I think this is important. Because you mentioned selfish. You mentioned selfish, right?
Yeah.
And I always like defining terms, man. I always like defining words so that way we really know what we're talking about, right? So when you say selfish, so let's be clear. So most people have like a negative connotation of selfish. It means that I only think about myself. Maybe I don't really care about what other people think. I don't consider how they feel, things like that. I don't advocate that type of selfishness. To me, I look at that more from I reclassify that as looking at it from like an egocentric point of view. Everything's about me. The world revolves around me, right? It doesn't. But when we say selfish, when I'm saying selfish, I'm saying it from the perspective of I care enough about myself to prioritize myself. I must be number one in my life first. Everybody else, and I'll be very clear here because I say this a lot. I mean, everybody else comes second. Like my child, relationship, everything comes after you. Why? Because if I don't take good care of myself, everything else isn't going to be sustainable. All my relationships are going to be negatively impacted. If I'm falling apart and I'm not doing what I need to do, I can't be a good parent. I can't be a good partner. There's so many other things that are going to be negatively hurt. So I have to prioritize myself. So I always got to be number one. So selfishness is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing.
No, 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 no. I love it. I'm glad that you made that distinction, because again, like we might see selfish in that, we might define it in that way, but most people don't. So it's important to make that distinction and remind people that, like, you know, selfish is necessary, and caring for yourself is absolutely necessary, and that's, again, like that's how you avoid burnout. That's how you maintain healthy relationships. That's how you can do a better job at your job,
Oh yeah.
regardless of what you do. Like if you're not your full self, like a lot of the time you're gonna feel like people are gonna be like basically taken away from you, and that's, we don't want that. We want you. We want to be giving, especially if you're an empath. Like you want to be giving, but we want to make sure that you give what you have. Like you can't give what you don't have. So it's make sure, like you can't give what you don't have.
Big fact.
So make sure you pick up first. Like take care of yourself. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree, man. I think I always thought of it like, I know a lot of times in therapy, people use like teacup metaphors, but I always think about, just a simple point that you always want to pour into yourself first, right? If I have this bottle and it's full, right? This is my emotional capacity. This is what I have, but I'm pouring it out for Carlos. I'm pouring it out for my clients. I'm pouring it out for my child. I'm pouring it out for my family, my friends. What happens when this thing is empty and then I have to look at myself? There's nothing here. There's nothing left. So then what am I supposed to do? That is the slow path, slow burn to burnout, because I don't give myself anything, and that's not sustainable. I never advocate anything to my clients or for myself that is not sustainable, because it's not a good outcome. I love people who are, because I consider myself to be too. I love those of us that are empathetic and that care so much about other people and other causes. I love that. I think those are great qualities and great attributes. I would never say anything about that. But we do also need to consider making sure we have appropriate boundaries. Because again, if I don't, and I care so much about everything else, then there's nothing really left when it comes back to me. It's like I gave to this cause, this situation, this person. And then when it's my turn, again, there's nothing left. I'm pouring nothing out into my cup. My only counteraction to that is to say, let me pour in myself first, which is why we were talking about being selfish, and then make sure I give to everybody else, because then I know that I'm going to be able to continue doing what I'm doing. So if I'm doing Carlos's work, I'm not going to have to sacrifice all the other things that I have going on personally because I gave to somebody else, and then I effectively can't keep doing this. If I want to keep doing lives, I can't do it. If I want to help my clients, I can't do it. Why? Because there's nothing left. I'm all messed up. And I had a period of time where I was able to be effective, and now it's done.
Just crash, exactly. And again, yes, we have like degrees in psychology, but also like I'm personally saying this from personal experience. As someone who's burnt out for just that, for like not filling my cup first, and working in a field that requires a lot of like intention and a lot of work and a lot of giving, I was burnt out, and I ended up not being able to serve anyone for some time, and that just defeats the whole purpose. If you're a giver, if you want to be empathetic and like give love to other people, it's important for you to make sure that you give love to yourself first.
Yeah.
Because that, like RJ said, is sustainable. Like anything that, if you're picking up any habit, if you're doing anything that's not sustainable, you gotta take a step back and see what other options you have, or how we can pivot whatever we're doing to make sure that it is sustainable. Because that way we can continue to help, we can keep it going, and we can continue to give ourselves to the people that matter to us in our own life.
Yes.
So
absolutely, man. I think that part is critical when you're talking about relationships. It's like, and I'm trying not to go on a tangent, but I think about this so much, like the people you care about, the people that you love, you want to be there, you want to support them, you want to encourage them, but you also understand that like, as much as I want to be there, like I got to make sure that I'm there for me first, so that I can continue to support you, to encourage you, to love you, whatever it is that you got going on. Or even just be there for you, be the helpful ear, right? Be there to listen to you and give you that space that we were just talking about, to listen to you. But I have to make sure that I'm always a priority. That's why I don't have any shame about saying like we are always number one. We always have to be number one. Everything else comes after. If we can do that, we will be able to better manage a lot of the stress that we have to deal with. It will be easier for us to manage our relationships with others because we won't seem so disconnected, you know, mentally and emotionally, because we're so burnt out from all the other stuff that we're dealing with. And especially for those of us that do this type of work, I would say even more so, it's important because it's very draining. It can be very mentally and emotionally draining to do this. Still love it. But that means I have to be more intentional about making sure that I take care of myself, because I can easily just take on and take on and take on. And then when it's time for me, I'm sitting here out of shape. I don't eat well. I'm probably getting sick all the time. And then my relationships suffer. But I'm like, yeah, but I care so much about you guys. I want to be here for all my clients. I want to be here for everybody else. I do. But let me show up for me first. Then it's easier to show up for everybody else. That's the only point I wanted to make there.
I love that. I love that. And honestly, like, I'm glad you brought that up, because I started thinking about like kind of the story that we tell ourselves as well. So like if you decide, if you watch this and you decide like I want to start journaling, I want to like take up that journey, or if you already do journal, something that I would definitely recommend to start with is to write down your story. What are you saying about yourself? How are you seeing yourself? It's so powerful, and it would literally dictate your behavior. It would dictate how you interact with other people. So if you don't know where to start, you're like, Carlo, but what do I write about? Like, I don't even start with your story. Start with your story.
Oh yeah.
And like, just kind of figure out, take a step back. You literally pay very close attention to the words that you're using, because words are powerful.
Yes.
Words literally dictate how we see the world, even sometimes. So it's important for you to like really be intentional and honest. Like, don't try to change the story, and like be honest of what story am I telling myself about where I come from? What story am I telling myself about the situations that I've been in? And what you can even go a little bit deeper and you. So, you know, start. Even if it's tonight, tomorrow morning, whatever. Like, make sure that you do dedicate that time to fill your own cup, and like literally be a little bit of selfish for yourself, because at the end of the day, you're doing it for others. It's like it's about the people you love. Especially for empath, it's important to hear like you're not. It's yes, it's for yourself, but it really is for so you can be the best version of yourself for other people, and give them the best you that you can.
No, absolutely. Can I piggyback on that some more?
Yeah, please.
I want to be mindful of time, but man, you getting me going, so I'm like, I want to go in.
Oh, I'm down. Let's do it.
No, man, but especially when you're talking about the story, right? And you were saying, how do you know, like, what to start with? Where do you share? Like you said, I would start with like the facts of the situation, what I actually went through. You know, like even when we talked before, like starting with, you know, your family upbringing, who was in your household, where did you grow up? Did you move a lot? Who was in your household? Where did you go to school? All those types of things. And then over time, you start to learn the language. Like when I said earlier, we tend to talk around the things. Over time, you start to learn, right? You start to be able to pinpoint what was the actual emotion. So to try to give an example, I had a client who we were trying to work on building emotional language, right? And they were talking about getting nervous a lot. They would basically describe the physiological symptoms. They would say like, you know, I would get like this like twisting in my stomach, and my heart would start beating, and I'd start sweating a little bit. And this is why I don't want to open up to my girl, because I'm concerned like how she's going to react. I want to tell her things, but then I'm also afraid. And by the way, this person is 17. So right in my demographic of like young person trying to intervene, you know, early on, right? And as I'm listening to this person describe more and more, I'm like, you know, and I never assume. I never like to assume how somebody feels. I always want to inquire and then confirm. And I'm like, you know, it sounds like you're afraid they're going to abandon you if you were to be honest. And they just kind of sat with it for a little bit. And, you know, then they kind of just nodded their head. And I was like, you know, a lot of men, we have that issue. Because again, that's like the duality of what we experience. You know, it's like, again, we get so many people who want us to be open, who they say that they want us to be open. But then when we try to, a lot of times we're not met with that grace. We're not met with that patience. We're not met with that vulnerability, that empathy, that compassion, right? We get met with criticism. We get met with judgment, right? Anger, hostility. It's like, how dare you? How dare you share how you feel? Because if it's not whatever I think it's supposed to be, then you can just go somewhere. And again, as a man, as a father, and as a therapist, I'm like, yo, this is not the move. Like, how do we think these two are going to go together? How are you telling people you want them to feel this way and to share with you, but this is what you tell them? And again, I'm not trying to say everybody does this, but I'm talking about from a societal perspective for a lot of men that I've had the fortune to get to know, and also based on a lot of my lived experience. We are not given those spaces. And then on the contrary, culturally, for some of us, we're even taught explicitly. Somebody's telling us, hey, you don't talk about that. You keep that here. You don't, you cross the door. This is what I was told. When you, like, this is the door, right? When you cross the threshold of this door, you don't say nothing. All that stays in this house. What do you think that does to a young child? What do you think that does to a teenage boy who maybe wants to have his first girlfriend or is trying to build good relationships with other men? And someone's like, hey, how you doing? Is there any surprise that we get that same static answer like you were joking about with your dad? I'm good. Everything's good. I'm fine. Why do you think we do that? Because it's conditioning, man. We've been conditioned for so long to not be real. We've been shamed out of being honest in a lot of cases. We hear all these expressions. Don't be a girl. Stop being a wimp, right? You hear all these things that all they're doing is subtly telling you, keep your feelings to yourself because possibly we don't actually care. That's how a lot of people are receiving that. And so I'm working very, very hard to try to decouple and deprogram a lot of us that's how we see things, because it took me a really long time as well to see it in a different way.
I agree. And honestly, for me, like it was until like very recently that I was struggling with the same thing because I had this conditioning that has been like shared with me that if you share, you're weak. If you share, you're like, you know, a wimp or whatever. The list goes on and on. Once I made that shift of mindset that by being vulnerable and sharing, you're actually strong, you're actually brave, you're actually powerful.
Oh, yeah.
Then I was able to really take pride in my own journey and my own story. Because if you have been through hardship and you were able to get past it, continue to move forward, you are powerful, you are brave, you are magnificent. Like that's the difference. It's completely the opposite of what we're being told, that by you being vulnerable and sharing, you're weak. You're all of this stuff that's not true. Yes. You're actually strong, and you're helping people understand that as well. And feel seen too, because when you share your story with people that you care about, they can see themselves within you, and they can understand. Oh, I'm not alone. I'm not. And some people even I've had conversations with people like, I thought I was crazy. Yeah. And like when they realize like, oh wait, yeah, you also feel that, like, yeah, like a lot of men do. We just don't talk about it. Like we just most, like if not all of us. So I think it's important to decide to make that that shift of mind, and remember that it's gonna take some time. Even it's not like Carlos told me this, now I'm changed. For like I heard it on the live, and now like I know that like it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to it takes it's let's move away from the word hard. It's challenging. It is challenging. But it does get easier the more that you do it, and the more that you share with people who actually are receptive and actually support you, and you sharing without judgment and actually listening from love and listening to understand, not just to respond.
There you go. Very, very big point you just mentioned there. Listening to understand, right? Not just listening to respond. So important. Because if we're listening, right, I can't immediately have this like snapback reaction to you, because that means I really wasn't listening, right? I actually just was sitting here waiting till you literally stop moving your mouth and then hit you back with something. That's not good conversation. That's not productive dialogue. That's just us
Mhm.
finding a way to try to get each other. Ooh, he hit me, I'm gonna hit him back. She hit me, I'm gonna hit her back. We don't subscribe to that. But I want to go back to the other point that you mentioned, because you brought up a story that happened to me last year. And I think it's important because I was mindful of that when I was trying to show this to my son. So, like a lot of people, I'm sure over the last 2 years, I had lost a couple of family members to COVID. And one of my cousins, one of my very close cousins, she passed away last, it was like October. And I remember specifically because this is something that, again, was not very comfortable for me growing up. I'm usually like very measured in how I display my emotions, particularly with my son. Not because I don't want him to see it, it's because I'm trying to make sure that I'm showing him that, like, in spite of everything I'm dealing with, that we can't keep it together, right? But in that moment, because I was very close with her, one of my favorite primas, man, she was like, I really, really missed her. And I remember I called him into the room and I literally broke down in front of him, like on purpose. Like I felt it coming. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like I knew it was coming and I was just like, let me just let you see here. So you need to see it. And ironically enough, like he said afterwards, he was like, Dad, I've never seen you cry before. And it was at that moment that I remembered, I was like, you got to show him that. Because he needs to know it's okay. And it starts when we're young. If you don't see it, you don't think it's normal, right? We only know what we see. So if we're not being shown and demonstrated that it's okay to talk, hey Carlos, come here, sit down. You look wrong. What's upset? Oh, nothing. Come on, man. Talk to me. I know something's up. I can see it on your face. If we don't create that environment and then not attack them or berate them or belittle them because they want to share, that's the only way we're going to change this. But for those of us that are parents or caretakers, or we have some kind of influence maybe in a young person's life, maybe we're a mentor. I think it's important, like exactly what I was just trying to do, to be comfortable to share those stories, right? Because people can relate. I had to get out of my own comfort zone to like not just project strength all the time. I was like, I need to show this vulnerability because he needs to know it's okay. Otherwise, he's going to be like, well, my dad never did, so I guess I'm not supposed to either. Right?
Yeah, right.
So I think it's important to be mindful of when we engage in those discussions and to be honest. Like we've talked about before, tell the whole story, right?
Yeah.
Don't just tell that piece of it. Tell the low part too. So I don't have any shame to say I was very saddened when I lost my cousin and I broke down in front of my son because I wanted him to see how much it devastated me. And also that loss hurts, but it doesn't have to be a permanent experience. It is difficult, it is challenging, right? A lot of people have lost people. That's why I don't feel special in that regard. I empathize with a lot of us who have lost loved ones over the course of this pandemic and obviously situations beyond. But to say we all need that space, right? We all need that space to be able to be honest about it. If I'm not okay, I need to be able to say I'm not okay. If I need help, I need to be able to actually ask for the help and not just sit here like, no, I'm going to be fine. I'm just going to kind of keep my chest poked out and hope that it goes away. It won't. It won't. It's better to take help. That's one thing we can do that women do a great job of is ask for help.
I mean, yeah, 100% agree. But definitely, we should definitely, as men, should learn from that and see and just move away from the idea that like asking for help is it's like making you less of a man or anything like that. If anything, like by you being brave enough to ask for help and admitting that you need it, it shows how strong you are and how like it helps to be an example for the younger generation because they also, if they never see you cry, they're gonna go into the world and just say like my dad ever cried, so like whatever happens to me, like people that I lose, like businesses that don't work and whatever, like it's important for them to know that it's okay to feel whatever you're feeling, and that you're not going to be judged for it, and understand that like that's going to be helpful more than actually going to take away from you. It's absolutely necessary. It's necessary, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, and I'm glad that you brought that up because not enough of us take this step to ask for help because it's been conditioned in our society, especially Black and brown communities, that if you ask for help, like it's that's you don't do that. I don't even like I don't even know the verbiage because I completely just remove it
Yeah,
from
no,
the vocabulary.
it's foreign. It's foreign,
Yeah,
right?
but
You're like,
I've
what?
heard
You need help
what
for
do
what?
people say?
Why?
Exactly, but asking
You're
for
supposed to
help
figure
is
it out.
it's normal if that's a word that you want to use. Like it's the right thing to do. Like if your car breaks down, you don't like and you don't know how to fix your car, you don't just go and like let me just start moving stuff around. You go and ask for help from an expert, someone that actually knows what they're doing, so you can get your car done.
Yeah.
I don't know how other men like similarities brought me
No,
to a car.
Carlos, you grab the wrench, you just start beating on the wheels, or you're like smacking the tires. Like, yeah, I think that's how you take this thing off, right? I don't even know about getting the keys and getting the torque wrench and being able to take all this stuff off. You don't know. If you don't know, it's okay. That's the whole point of
That's
what you're
okay.
saying, right? It's completely okay if you don't know what to do. And I would make the point, especially from specifically from an emotional standpoint, right? I'm like, most of the men I know don't know what to do. And I'm not shaming them for not knowing because guess what? I
We're
didn't know
taught.
what to do for a very
We're
long
never
time.
taught.
So I'm the
In
last
schools
person to
or
make you feel bad about
home.
it. I want
Yeah.
us to be encouraged to say, I don't know. Where do you think I should start? What direction would you point me into? How can I begin? And like
Mhm.
like we talked about earlier, I think to me, willingness is the big differentiation there. Like somebody can
Mhm.
give you, I don't have a, well, actually I do have a book. Hold on. Somebody can give you a book and all this other
Mhm.
information and say, hey, this will help solve all your problems, right? We've all been in situations like this. Somebody's trying to give you game, they're giving you wisdom, they're giving you experience, and you may not be receptive to it at that time. One of the hardest challenges I've had to realize in working with people is you got to be patient.
Mhm.
You gotta meet that person where they're at that time. Meaning, if they're resistant to change, the more you push them, the more they're gonna pull away. Some
Mhm.
people, unfortunately, have to experience more hardship before they snap out of it.
So
Example I
they can see
usually
the
give,
value in what you're sharing with them, because they
yeah,
might never even see the value in what you're trying to share with them. So
absolutely,
like a lot of the time, like they like you said, like sadly, like they have to experience more hardship, and
yeah,
we can't force anyone to want to do the healing. They have to be willing to do the work
yeah,
to get better.
no, absolutely,
If they're not willing, then like you can try. You can again, you could share a million books with them. You can send them a video. If they're not willing to open it, and they're like,
no,
that's not really something that's
a-
gonna happen.
absolutely, no. It's facts, man. I usually give an example like for men. I see a lot of times for us uniquely, and maybe you'll say something similar, but for a lot of the men that I know. For example, a lot of us will do things like finally come to therapy or start working on ourselves, usually when we've lost a loved one. And when I say lost a loved one, sometimes it could be grief, like somebody passed away, or sometimes it's the
Mhm.
loss of a relationship. And
Gotcha.
there's things that maybe our partner said that all of a sudden we're like, oh, that's what she meant. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I should probably talk to somebody about this. Like all of a sudden it's like this key got unlocked, the wall came down, the gate is open, and now all of a sudden I can understand. I'm like, oh, okay, so I need to work on myself. I need to do these things. But for whatever reason, I was very comfortable being set in my ways. Now all of a sudden I'm
Mhm.
like, you know what? I need to actually try harder. I need to actually work on this. I need to do better. And so I think about those type of situations, right? Again, for me as the provider, I don't want us to have to lose loved ones and lose relationships to wake up. So
Mhm.
I exist in this middle ground where I understand some people are just going to have hardship before
Mhm.
they are more willing to start working on themselves, and that's okay. I'm not going to make you feel bad for it, right? And some people, it may take them longer. That's fine. But for the ones that are ready, a trend I've noticed for many of them is that we usually lost something or someone that has helped be the catalyst, the change agent that pushed us to actually go get started.
Wholeheartedly agree. Wholeheartedly agree. And like as we were talking about help, I was talking about asking for help. I think something that stood out to me as well, like it was when you brought up like just saying that I don't know,
Mm.
because I feel like that's also a pretty strong paradigm in our communities, especially for men,
Oh yeah,
that on this lie that you're supposed to know everything, And we know that you can be like what, like Neil deGrasse Tyson and have like be a astrophysicist, and you still will never know everything. That's okay, and it's okay like to ask for help. It's okay to not know something and admit that you don't know something. That's honestly, like, if you read any book about leadership, a good leader, whether you're leading your own life, whether you're leading your family, whether you're leading your company, whatever it is, admits when they don't know something and is honest about, hey, I don't know. And that just, it helps everyone around you. It helps you, and it helps you gain clarity as well. And at the end of the day, it allows you to gain the answers so that you do.
No, can I add something to that? Because that is a beautiful sentiment. And I would say, like, I literally take that approach in therapy, but I also think just as people. Like, I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. But I think it's such a beautiful point that you're making. Most therapists, if you guys don't know, most therapists, when you come to sit down, our approach is educate me on who you are and why you see things the way that you do. Because I understand that I am not you, I am not in your mind, I'm not in your heart. I don't possibly know how you feel. There's some factors that I might be able to consider as to why you're here. Of course, you give us some background information, but it's not always as extensive. So more of it comes out as we start to work together, right? The reason why I make that point is because I am trying genuinely to inspire all of us to take that approach with each other. Instead of, and I'm saying this for, I don't care if you've been married for 50 years, I don't care if it's your son or your daughter, I don't care if it's your brother, your sister, mom or dad. I want us to stop making assumptions about what the other person is saying and what they mean. I want us to genuinely be curious, right? Be curious, ask the questions. I don't know. Carlos, when you said this, what did you mean? Before I go down the path of getting upset and getting frustrated, of thinking, oh, is that what he meant when he said? No, let me ask the brother. Let me look at him. Is that what you meant? Because this is how I'm taking it. And then I can look at you and you might say, oh, no. That's not what I meant at all. And guess what? I don't have to get frustrated. I don't have to be distant. I don't have to start being rude with you or hostile with you. Like, none of that has to happen. We can just genuinely have a good exchange, but we do so much assumptions because we don't want to confront each other. We don't want to be curious. Again, back to those assumptions. We're just like, he must have meant that. And we don't even realize, man, the implicit bias is so strong that you think everything that you see is real. Like, you think it is exactly the way that you see it. You don't even recognize that I've gone through the experience. I got traumas. Like, I've gone through stuff. That's why I see it like that. So I really hope we give each other more grace and more patience. Like, listen, I try my best. I am not perfect. I just try really hard to always be curious about no matter who I'm dealing with.
And this is something that we talked about on the podcast we did too. Like, honestly, like when you're having a conversation with someone that might be, a little bit deeper, a little bit, that would take a decent amount of emotional energy from you per se. It's like a good way to start is asking each other, what's your intention for the conversation you're about to have? That allows you to go into it with clarity, allows you to understand where the other person's coming from, what they want, why they want to have the conversation, and why you want to have the conversation. And that way, when you decide to have this conversation, and you get like off track or someone gets emotional, you could go back to the intention and like, oh, remember we wanted to have this conversation so we could either understand each other better, so that we could figure out this problem, whatever the intention was before you started. That's a good way to like go into it. And of course, like make sure that like RJ say, ask questions, like be like inquisitive and like really like want like make the put in the work to like really find out what the other person means before you allow your own conditioning to dictate what they're saying.
Yes, very
your brain will automatically decide for you, but you don't have to let it decide. You can allow it to step back. You can take a step back and just kind of like, okay, I know they said that. This is what I understood. But is this what you meant? You can even say what your brain told you. I mean, like, is this what you meant? And kind of just like, oh, no, it wasn't. Oh, wow, okay. And you can just let that go. And
Facts.
continue with our healthy and productive conversation. That's
Yes.
actually going to like yield solutions rather than create more problems. Because that's what a lot of people in relationships do. They just fight all the time, and they think that they're solving the problems. You're just adding, like you're layering problems on top of
Mhm.
problems without solving the original problem at the root.
No, man, absolutely. I think so much, especially that's why I talk about it, especially when it comes to relationships. Like
Mhm.
we're filling in so many of the blanks on our own. That's the crazy part. Like we don't even recognize that we're doing it sometimes. We're just like, I, I might have, like, I'm sure you probably have some conversation with yourself sometimes. I certainly do, especially if you know something
Mhm.
important you want to share with somebody, maybe, right?
Definitely.
Maybe it's a little sensitive and you're like, I want to kind of rehearse how I would do it.
Yeah.
So you go and have the conversation and you start talking it through, but then maybe you get so used to saying things like, you know, I've been with them for this long. I know them pretty well. I'm pretty sure Carlos is going to say this. So then I'm going to say this. Instead, though, what I would suggest is let's maybe structure the conversation of what I really want to make sure I communicate well, to make sure I'm trying my best to make sure Carlos understands how I feel. And then on the flip side, whatever you say, I need to, like you said, I need to make sure I sit there and really digest it. Some people,
Mhm.
I'll make another example. Some people, in my experience, like I think many of us fall into one of two camps. We are good on our feet and we can process very quickly. And some of us need more time. Some of us might need a day or a few days before you can
Mhm.
really thoughtfully respond to something that somebody's telling you. I think it's important to understand the distinction because it helps you sort of put in the back of your brain, be patient. So if I think everybody should be answering all the questions right off the bat, I call it like freestyle.
Mhm.
Everybody's not going to be
Mhm.
good off the top of their head. If you make everybody have to do that, you're going to get very frustrated because many people don't operate that way. They need time to thoughtfully consider what you're telling them and what you're sharing. And if I'm pressuring them to, no, 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 you need to answer now. You can't leave the house. No, we're going to have this discussion right now. It's going to get tense, man. It's going to get hostile.
Mhm.
It's probably not going to go well. So I don't
Mhm.
want to encourage us to do that. I want to say, hey, let's understand how we both communicate and how we both understand. Well, I'm good on my feet. I need more time. Okay. So let's set up an agreement of when we have these serious discussions, let's give each other more time. Let's budget a little more time to know that it's not going to get all solved tonight, but we're being thoughtful and intentional about starting the conversation now, at least. I think that's an important distinction for us to know.
I agree. And another distinction that I think is also important when we're having these conversations, and this distinction comes, it's more about ourselves than anything else. It's important that we focus on being responsive rather than reactive. This is something that we spoke about too in the past, and this takes work. This is not something that you just like, because you like our instinct, like our automatic response is to react to whatever's put in front of us. And so many of us like believe that this is like our true self. Many of us believe that this is what we truly believe and this is where our values lie. But if we are able to listen, notice whatever it is that those words made us feel, take a step back, whether it's like a few seconds, a couple hours, a day or two, like RJ said, and make sure that we're responding accordingly to what was actually presented to us, that it's another way that we can actually avoid those unhelpful conversations and those like destructive conversations, because it is very much about how we're taking it in, and we're taking the time to like, okay, let me make sure that like what I'm saying is like productive and helpful, and it's
Yes.
actually going to help um, yield solutions.
Yeah.
you know,
No,
little things.
absolutely. No, yeah, we want productive conversations. We don't want to just be finding reasons to fight. Like, you know, there's plenty of reasons to get upset about, you know, what's going on in our personal lives, what's going on in the world. Like, if you want to get angry, there's many reasons you could find to get angry. I'm always trying to help us find ways to compromise, to collaborate, to create more peace and understanding. And
Yes.
I think it's one of those things like it sort of has to be your outlook on life. It has to be your general disposition towards life that I don't want to create more problems. I don't want to fight and argue. I want to understand people. Even if I disagree with you, this will usually mess people up. Even when I disagree with your viewpoint, I still want to understand why you feel the way that you do. You're not wrong for feeling that way. I can still not like your position, right?
Yep.
But I can still treat you with respect, right? So I think it's important, even when we might have some maybe conversations or discussions that might get tense, or there might be a particular topic that we find difficult to navigate, I still think we can treat each other with civility. I still think we can find a way to have productive dialogue, leave peacefully, and not create and add new issues that we then are stacking on top of each other down the road. Because then we've got to unpack that at some point, right? If this is a romantic relationship and I don't talk about stuff, some people do this. They bust out the laundry list. They're like, yo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're about to have a conversation. Boom, I'm hitting you with all. Now you got to deal with all of it right now. And it's like, hey, I wasn't ready for that. Like, I thought we were talking about this one thing. Yeah, but I got 7 other issues we need to talk about right now. That's not fair. That's not fair. You're kind of disarming that person because you're not giving them a chance to thoughtfully go point by point and actually resolve each one. And that's what I think is more important. I want us to actually understand, make sure we're communicating effectively, and then resolve those issues issue by issue instead of building them all up and then kind of hitting each other with them whenever we finally sit down to talk about things.
Definitely, I wholeheartedly agree. And I want to close the call there because everything that you just said, it was the intention of this call, I believe. So just a few takeaways from this call, because just to emphasize some points. Feel your feelings, do the work, listen to understand, not to just respond, and be compassionate, kind with your own journey. Remember this stuff, and it's gonna take some time. Really working through all this stuff, especially if the first time that you discover this stuff was through this call, it's gonna take some time. Yep. There's a lot of stuff that you're gonna be learning about yourself, especially if you start journaling after this, and you're gonna learn a lot about yourself. So take your time, be compassionate with yourself. Find people that if you're gonna talk to someone, make sure that person is gonna be there to support you and to provide a safe space for you. And make sure you ask for that too. Like it's okay to be open and honest and be like, hey, I'm dealing with some stuff, or there's something that I've been struggling with. Can I tell you? Can I talk to you about it? And would you listen to me without judgment, without criticism, and just support me in where I am right now? It's okay. And if they say yes and they don't, then that's on them. But at the end of the day, you went in there with that clarity to make sure that you get the best results and then you get the best support possible, because that's really necessary.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more. I think and also just to add one more little point, if you're not ready to do the work yet, or you don't have that community of support quite yet, I think you could leverage things like social media if you find those type of spaces that maybe there's messaging that you see, or pictures that you see, or stories that you listen to, or videos that you watch, that gives you that sense of encouragement to allow yourself to dedicate some time to do that. That's why on my channel and on the podcast that you were gracious enough to come on to. That's why we're having those discussions. So that was a huge motivation for me to even make the videos that I make, is hoping that that's sort of a passive way to get somebody closer and closer to being willing. It's I heard it here, and then I heard it here, and then I saw this person talk about it, and their situation was similar to mine. Let that be sort of a passive motivation. I'm going to keep allowing myself to get more immersed in this type of thinking. So hopefully over time, that barrier to entry, my lack of motivation to want to start, will slowly decrease, and I'll be more likely to go talk to somebody. And even if it's starting with, again, like you said, with a friend, and then maybe I'm building up to starting with a therapist. But be mindful of the content that you consume. It might help you on that process.
I definitely agree. Content is everything nowadays. Many people spend more time on their phones than they do looking at actual people. So
especially right now,
a lot of the time we don't realize how influential, truly, influencers, how influential that is in our own mindset. So take a look, take a step back. How you're spending your time on social media, what kind of information you're receiving, and be intentional about the stuff that you're letting in, like RJ said, like be intentional about it. Like do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're getting the right information that's going to help you move into becoming the person that you want to become.
Oh yeah. And there's also I think there's some good creators out there that are starting to talk more about mental health and therapy and things like that. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that's trying to get into this space. So, you know, look out for us. We got pages, we got YouTube, we got podcasts. Check us out. The IWS podcast. Carlos is on there. You'll see us, you'll see our stuff. Man. Come check us out. Hopefully that can be a gateway for some of you to really take more stock in yourself and make sure you're putting in the effort to live a better version of your life.
For sure, and like I just say, make sure you go follow him on Inspire Wellness here on Instagram, and he is sharing amazing like resources for our community that can save people's lives truly. So make sure you go and show us some support. And I want to thank you if you watch this.
Thank you, brother.
If you watch this whole thing, thank you for dedicating that time to yourself, for allowing yourself to come into the safe space where we talk about absolutely important topics that are simply that are taboo. They're not talked about enough in our communities a lot of the time. But that's why we're doing this, because we want to get rid of that stigma. We want to make sure that these conversations are more common and become the norm, or however you want to say it, because they are, or feelings are the norm, and your self-worth is the norm. So make sure you take care of yourself. Thank you, RJ, for being on this call. I really, really appreciate you. I know that we went a little bit longer than expected, but like I think this is necessary. Like I mentioned, like I think it's necessary, and we need to add this value to our community, so that we can continue to heal and get better.
Yes, sir. Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me, man. I hope to collaborate again in the future. Thank you all for whoever watched. I hope you got something from this, and I hope, if anything, you know, keep up with some of the stuff that we're doing, because I know we're really trying to reach as many people as we can, because we want people to live better lives. So thank you for all the support.
For real. Exactly what I just said. Thank you so much. As you guys know, it's all love. Take care of yourselves. And yeah, we'll probably be back again soon. So, you know, take care.
Peace.
All right.